Hello. Where are we? There we go. Hello. So my talk today is about Colony, the title of my talk is Smart Contract-Based Infrastructure for the Future of the Firm. And don't worry, I'm going to actually define what all of those words mean. I'm going to start with Colony. So when I talk about colony, we like thinking of the ant colony, right? The idea that every little ant does its tasks, does a little bit of work, but collectively the entire colony shows an intelligence that goes beyond an individual ant and can, manage challenges and feats of engineering that would be impossible if you just look at an ant. And our goal is to get this kind of emergent intelligence from having people work together over the internet. So, talking about the internet, let me step back a bit and go back to the 90s, the World Wide Web. Yeah, when that came about, there was a lot of excitement, like tremendous excitement and hype in the 90s, and we said, the special thing is now with the web, anyone, anywhere in the world can talk to anyone else, anyone can publish, there's no more barriers to entry. Well, there were some, they're technical, but nothing insurmountable. So this huge open playing field where anyone could communicate with anyone else. And this led to cooperation on a global scale that we've never seen before. And I really mean cooperation on common projects. So, maybe it seems, we've gotten so used to it, we've forgotten how amazing it is. And maybe for children today, it's taken for granted, but I'm still amazed, that Wikipedia exists, right? This is an amazing achievement, and we've gotten so used to it. And all it needed was for people around the world to be able to input text and communicate, right? So the new ingredient that I want to add to this discussion today is called blockchain. And blockchain, a lot has been written about it, a lot of hype and a lot of misinformation. And so let me start by saying what it isn't, right? It isn't the trust machine. It isn't digital currency. It isn't peer-to-peer cash. Those are all aspects to it, but that doesn't tell you what it's really all about. The blockchain is a technology that gives us new possibilities to do things over the internet, right? It's a cooperation and coordination tool. And what it allows us to do is conduct. Wow, this is jumping around. There you go. What it allows us to do is to do commerce over the internet. Right? Instead of just being able to communicate with each other, what the web allowed, it allows us to enter contractual agreements and conduct commerce. So the technology of the blockchain itself is relatively robust. It can support the Money app, which is the most famous one. Like the first app ever deployed on a public blockchain was a currency called Bitcoin. And here we see the logos of Bitcoin, Litecoin, and on the right, Ether, which is the built-in currency of the Ethereum blockchain. And so I mentioned Ethereum, so let me now bring it up. The Ethereum blockchain is a general-purpose blockchain that can run arbitrary computer code. Right? We call this code smart contracts, and I'll get to that in a minute. So maybe think about the difference between a Bitcoin and an Ethereum the way you think of like a calculator and a general purpose computer, right? One of them shifts numbers around, which is what a currency is. The other one shifts numbers around and does a bunch of logic with it, so that's what a computer is. So it's more general. And to put things in context, this is where Colony lives, right? Colony is a family of smart contracts running on Ethereum and other tools so to enable us to work together in collectives and self-govern. So in summary, what Colony is all about uses smart contracts and other Web 3.0 technologies, so it's all serverless and resilient, and it covers everything you might need for collective governance of projects. That is, work and evaluation of work, accounting for work, paying for work, collective decision-making, disputes and arbitration. All the logic of all of that is baked to the smart contract, and the goal is to have this self-governing, organically growing, scalable collective. So over the internet, we can really work together on global scale projects in a self-governing manner. Right? Is that clear? That's the goal, right? That's where I want to get you today. I'm going to take this step by step. I'm actually going to start really small. I'm going to start with what smart contracts are, because smart contracts are neither smart nor are they contracts. So that might be confusing. I've said before, smart contract is what we call code when it's deployed on the Ethereum blockchain, right? So here's a bit of code, and it's just like any other computer code. It's just when we deploy it on Ethereum, we call it a smart contract, right? And we like calling things that are code smart because code is more flexible than text on paper. I know, my smartphone isn't very smart either, it just runs a lot of code, so that's where the name comes from. The other special thing about these contracts is, or this code is, that anyone, anywhere in the world can access it. There are no barriers to entry. Well, there are some, they're technical but not insurmountable, but you could get into a contract with someone in a completely different country, different jurisdiction, you don't have to know who they are, so it really is, this opens up a global playing field of people you can interact with commercially. And the other important aspect is that these contracts cannot be stopped. When you deploy something on Ethereum, it will keep running as programmed, and nobody can strong-arm a smart contract to change the rules afterwards. Nobody can break the rules. And because of this determinism, we call this code a contract. Right, so that's where the name smart contract comes from. Right, let's look at some simple examples so you can imagine how this works. The first example, the currency app I've already mentioned, it's very basic because all it needs to do is accounts and balances in accounts and the ability to transfer numbers from one account to another. So I could just interact with a contract by sending a message saying, here, withdraw 15 from my account and add it to the HR Fest organizers because they've done such a great job. And then I wait for a confirmation from the blockchain, and that's all it does. One number goes down, the other goes up, and that's all a currency really is. But you know, even though it's so simple, this is not a theoretical example. There's hundreds and hundreds of these currencies alive today. All of these are digital currencies. They don't have their own blockchain. They're all running as one of these contracts on the Ethereum Ethereum blockchain. So, very common example. Now imagine I have one of these currencies and you have the other, and we want to exchange them, right? So let's look at what an exchange contract might look like. Right? I want to trade X for Y. Now normally, we'd have a problem. If I want to, trade X with you, right? I could either send X to you and then wait for you to send Y back, and if you don't, I have a problem, or I could tell you to send me Y first, and if I don't send you X, you have a problem. The next step we might do is, okay, so we need to secure ourselves, so we hire a lawyer, make a contract of sale. We can sign it over the internet, right? Everyone, it's great, we can sign contracts, signature on a smartphone, and then I send you X, you don't send me Y, and now I can sue you somewhere in some jurisdiction. But you know, that's hard. Or we can get a third party. We can both give our money to some notary, and then the notary does the exchange, as long as the notary doesn't run off with the funds. So smart contracts can help in this way. We have a trade X for Y contract. I can send whatever I have to the smart contract, and now the smart contract is in control of those funds. Somebody else comes along with Y and sends Y to the smart contract, and the smart contract is in control of both of those funds, and then the smart contract can do one of two things. It can either refund the participants, or it can perform the exchange, and that's all it can do. You know, nobody can steal the funds, and you're completely safe going into this exchange, even though you have no idea who the other party is. You don't have to. So that's a really powerful idea, to be able to exchange, do business with people anonymously over the internet, right? So the smart contract really it's the trusted third party. It's the bill of sale. It's the trusted third party that you don't have to trust, because everything it does is pre-scripted, right? It cannot cheat. All right, so that works well if what we're trading are these digital currencies or other assets on the blockchain. Like, we like talking about on-chain and off-chain in this business. So when things are on-chain, it's easy. And don't think of on-chain as just being digital currencies. You know, digital currency is just a list of accounts with a list of account balances. There could be any other databases. Like, a popular example is one of a land registry. You know, like something like, if the government here put the land registry on the blockchain, like all the apartments in Budapest next to all the owners of those apartments, then I could buy an apartment from you without a lawyer or a notary, when the smart contract takes my money and your ownership of the apartment and swaps the two out. And also, this is not a hypothetical example. There's real research going on into this space, and there's projects of putting land registries on the blockchain for precisely this reason, right? So if everything's on the blockchain, it's fine. If things are not on the blockchain, then we've got to have intermediaries. You know, somebody has to input that data, so we do have to play a little more complicated games. So, for example, if we had, we'd have to have some external witness that an exchange happened. So if I want to exchange X for Y, X is on the blockchain, but Y isn't, the contract would have to have, the two parties to the exchange and a designated witness. So, I send X to the contract, that stays the same. The basic idea is the other party would do the exchange off-chain, and then the witness is the person who inputs the data. Yes, this exchange happened, and the rules. It's not so important to study these rules. I mean, the point I'm trying to get across is that there is still a role for humans to input data and to trigger things on the blockchain. It's not all fully automatic and autonomous. Humans still have a role to play. Talking of humans, Colony, right? Colony is all about getting humans to work together. The smallest piece of Colony is a task. A task is something about work that we might do within a day or a few days. It's a smart contract. It contains administrator who manages the work, an evaluator who gets to input whether the work was done. It contains the bounty, of course, that can be locked up, the payment or the accounting token. It contains the worker, the person who does the work, and it contains all the logic you might do of submitting work, evaluating work, complaining that the evaluator didn't do the work, disputes resolution, the works. So that's the smallest piece in a colony. And what Colony does is keeps track of thousands of these tasks in an organization called a colony. Right? So who does what work, how much they were paid, what skills were needed, and so this task orchestration is what the project is all about. And rewarding participants that do well and punishing those that do badly, and sort of making the collective governance in the end meritocratic so that those who do best get the most influence and so on. So that's I mentioned the goal already before. And it should be scalable, so when we start a colony, it might just be one little bit. We call it a domain. A domain is a small unit, and if your colony grows and becomes too unwieldy, you can spawn subdomains. So here I've got an example, a research department, and if that grows, it can spawn subdomains itself. Each domain will have its own budget, each domain will have its own tasks, and the reputation you earn for a task will be subject to the domain. The accounting is within the domain, and parent domains, and this entire structure will keep self-replicating and dividing, so otherwise it wouldn't be scalable. Now, even though there's a lot of structure and a lot of counting to do, it doesn't mean it has to be hard, right? Because everything is based in software, it's not hard to follow the rules. There's a lot of alternative management, non-hierarchical systems that require humans to go through a lot of steps and a lot of rules to participate in, but with software it should be relatively easy. It should be like playing a video game, right? So let me quickly go into how this might look in practice. So for the example today is I'm not going to talk too much about collective governance. I'll talk more about that tomorrow at the EODF conference if you're there. Today I want to talk about just like giving out work and evaluating work en masse. So Colony is modular. You could just take out just the task management aspect, and because it's open source, integrate it with your task management software, your project management software, and just use that part. And then, well, it depends on your task management. If it looks like this, you'll have a problem. It's not easily integratable. But anything that's based on software, like some kind of a Kanban board, a Trello, Asana, whatever, there's no reason each one of those tasks couldn't tie into a Colony task in the background, right? And then it could look, you'd have like a list of colonies like this. You could have a list of tasks in a colony looking like this. Even though smart contracts and blockchains are hard, it doesn't mean interacting with them has to be. It can look just like any other web application. And then our model would be something like this. You'd have a manager who creates a bunch of tasks and a bunch of goals and offers them to the colony in the system. And these tasks can be picked up by anyone in your organization who has time available and the necessary skills for a task. Right? It doesn't have to be within a working group or a department. It's completely flexible. You can find pools of unused talent in an organization, especially as organizations grow bigger. This flexibility is very valued. And it doesn't just have to be tasks. It could be projects that are then divided into sub-projects and farmed out to people. And the nice thing about this flexibility is it's good for the administrative side, it's good for the employee side, but usually the prohibiting factor is administrative. It's really hard to keep track of all the paperwork and all the who does what, but that accounting is automatic in a blockchain-based system. So that's what we call being open internally. You create work and it's being picked up by people wherever they have time, and all the payments and all the accounting is done automatically for you. And once you've gotten to this point where at one part you create tasks and at the other end people pull the tasks, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to open up to this whole global talent pool as well. Just farm out work to people all over the world because, you know, payments and accounting come for free, so there's no extra overhead. So before you think everything is transactional, Colony also has, you know, space for salaried positions and more long-term business. So I just gave examples of creating single individual tasks, but it doesn't have to be. So that's just the point I wanted to make. And then the other thing is, when I say accounting, I don't just mean that it does payments for you automatically. I mean, it does that, but it also keeps track of how much time was spent on what work, what skills were needed, and all of this information comes for free. And it goes into, in Colony, when in the final, you know, decentralized, self-organizing collective Colony, all of this information goes into the governance, the collective governance system. So because Colony is really about getting groups of people to work together and to self-manage, and you'd be the administrator of one task, a worker in another, an evaluator in a third. There's no, a priori, you don't need a strict hierarchy, and this all could be completely flexible, and that's how all the parts of Colony work together. So I talked today about the tasks, work, and evaluation a little bit, but for the collective governance, we need more. We need to have dispute resolution. We need to figure out who has how much say, and that's where the reputation system comes in. So the interplay between all this, and I'm running out of time, is to really try to get new global scale cooperation working together and to really bring about the future of work, right? That is the goal that we're trying to be together. And we'd love you to join us. So we're colony.io. I'm trying to point out our new newsletter, v.ht Colony newsletter, if you're interested in what we do and what's happening in this space. We can't do this alone. You know, this is a new project, new field of, we're all experimenting, we're all learning, and I'd love to answer questions if you have them for me outside afterwards. Thank you for listening. Thank you.